My name is Corvin Ash, and for 31 years I have kept the debris line at the Tally Reef, the forward post that sits at the edge of what used to be a battlefield and is now, mostly, a graveyard we mined out of respect. We call it a salvage post because that is the polite word for it. What we really do is remember. 19,000 years ago, before there were names for most of what circles this sun now, a warband came down out of the dark and took Earth apart. They called themselves the Harrow Concern. Though nobody living had heard that name, they stripped the old cities the way a man strips a carcass he doesn't intend to return to, quickly, without ceremony, taking what could be carried and burning what couldn't. Then they left, fat with plunder, laughing, certain they had gutted a world that would never matter again. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about almost everything, as it turned out. But that was the first wrongness, and it was the one that mattered. The reef itself doesn't look like much, if you come at it without knowing its history. It's a scatter of rock and old hull plates strung along 40 kilometers of the outer belt, lit gray by a sun that's already spent by the time its light reaches us. Most days the work is unglamorous, cataloging drift, clearing debris lanes, keeping the long-range arrays tuned to notice things that mostly never come. I raised 2 children out here. My son used to ask me why we bothered watching a stretch of space that never showed anything worth watching. I told him the same thing my own instructor told me. The day it shows you something is the only day that will ever matter, and everything before it is just practice for staying awake. Earth did not chase them. That is the part people from other worlds find hardest to believe when I tell it. We had the wreckage of our own cities to prove what had been done to us. And we had every reason in the galaxy to burn a path after the Harrow Concern and make them answer for it there and then. We didn't. My grandmother's grandmother used to say that a people who spend their strength chasing the ones who wrong them have no strength left for the ones who wronged them worse, and that Earth had already buried enough of its children to know the difference between grief and hunger. So we built instead, quietly, for a long time. Long enough that quiet stopped meaning weak and started meaning something else entirely. We built the reef stations out along the old scattered debris, and we built the watch lines, and we built ships that did not exist in any registry the Harrow Concern would recognize if they ever thought to look. Mostly they didn't think to look. Mostly they spent those 19,000 years exactly the way you'd expect a warband to spend a fortune, badly, loudly, and eventually down to nothing. That was the shape of it when they finally came back. Not conquerors returning to finish a job. Debtors, coming home to collect on an account they assumed was still theirs to draw from. I was the one on duty when their lead ship crossed the outer marker. I want to be honest about what I felt, because there's no dignity in pretending it was simple. It was old wreckage metal, that ship, patched 100 times over. The kind of hull that had been rebuilt so many times it barely remembered its own original lines. Behind it came 6 more, just as tired, just as hungry looking. I had grown up on stories of what the Harrow Concern were supposed to be. I expected something that still looked like a hammer. What crossed that marker looked like a people who had spent everything they'd stolen from us and come looking for more of the same. I logged the approach, and I sent the signal up the line, the way I'd trained 100 times to do, and never once believed I would actually need to. My hands were steadier than I expected. That surprised me more than the ships did. Some part of me had always assumed that when the moment finally came, after a lifetime of drills against a threat that never arrived, I would fumble it. I didn't. The training held, the way it was built to. Within the hour, the reef's own ships were arrayed along the debris field, not hidden, not lying in ambush, just standing where they always stood, doing what they'd always done. Nothing about our formation changed. That was, I think, the cruelest part of it, if cruelty is even the right word for simply refusing to lie about who you are. We didn't scramble a defense. We didn't rush reinforcements from the inner worlds. We were already exactly where we needed to be, because we had been exactly where we needed to be for longer than the Harrow Concern's oldest surviving crewman had been alive. That was the thing nobody on the other side understood until it was too late to matter. We had never needed to hide our strength from them, because they had never once thought to look for it. Their lead vessel hailed us before it reached the inner line. I heard the voice, rough, impatient. The voice of someone repeating a script from a much easier age. They named the old cities. They asked, more or less, what tribute remained to be taken, as if the intervening 19,000 years were a debt still owed in their favor, rather than in ours. I didn't answer that hail. That wasn't my place, but I watched the response come back from the command platform above us, and I watched the Warband's lead ship go dead quiet on its approach vector the moment our answer reached them. Not words at first, just the picture. The picture of what the debris field actually was, not ruins. Not a graveyard we'd left untended and forgotten, the way they'd left the wreck of our own cities behind them. A watch line, armed, disciplined, patient past anything they had a word for, arrayed the whole length of the outer belt like it had been waiting there the entire time they were off spending our city's worth of plunder on nothing that lasted. I have thought about that silence more than almost anything else in my life. 19,000 years, and the moment that actually broke them wasn't a weapon, it was arithmetic. They could count ships. They could count the age of our hulls against the age of theirs, and understand, in the space of about 4 seconds, exactly how badly they had misjudged what happens to a world you leave for dead and don't bother to watch. The reply that finally came from their lead ship wasn't defiance, it was a question, and a small one, asking what Earth intended. The answer we sent back wasn't a threat either. It was an accounting, plain, unhurried, delivered the way you'd read out a debt to a debtor who has finally come home to pay it. What had been taken, what had been done with the taking, what remained now of the people who'd done it, and what Earth was prepared to accept in its place. No demand for blood, no demand even for everything they still had, which by then wasn't much. Only a settlement, offered once, calmly, by a people who had spent 19,000 years learning exactly how much strength it takes to not use strength at all. They took it. Every ship in that ragged little fleet powered down its weapons before we'd finished speaking, and the lead vessel came in under full surrender protocol, the kind you only see in old training records nobody expects to use in their lifetime. Not one shot was fired the whole day. Not one shot needed to be. I watched their captain come down the ramp of that patched-together ship hours later, under guard but not under threat, and I watched him look up at the length of the reef's watch line, the way a man looks at a debt he thought was dead and buried, finally understanding it had been drawing interest the entire time he wasn't looking. He didn't say much. There wasn't much left to say. He asked, once, why we hadn't simply destroyed them the moment they crossed the marker, and the officer beside me answered him plainly, because Earth had spent longer learning patience than the Harrow concern had spent learning anything at all, and it seemed a poor use of 19,000 years of discipline to throw it away in the last 4 seconds. I still keep the debris line. I still log every hull that crosses the outer marker, the way I was trained, the way my post has always done. But I log something else now too, something my grandmother's grandmother would have understood better than I did the day it happened, that a people who are ready do not need to be first to strike, and do not need to be loud, and do not need anyone else's fear to prove what they've built. They only need to still be standing, patient and whole, on the day the ones who wronged them finally come home to see what's left. We were still standing. We had been the whole time. That was the only thing that ever needed saying.